Hello there, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Peter and Ralph's Weekly Chat. And I'm joined, as always, by Ralph Hebgen, former superstar equity analyst in our London studio. This week, we are going to cover three topics. Firstly, we've got some advice for President Biden. Secondly, how to monetize AI, artificial intelligence. And thirdly, will TikTok get banned? And if it did, what would happen? So those are the things that we are going to be talking about today. So in terms of just kicking off with regard to the first thing, because I know that President Biden, obviously listens to this podcast, so we just thought we'd give him some advice. Anyway, the reason why we why we are talking about this is because he has actually put forward plans for big tax increases that will affect all sorts of massive companies, investors, billionaires, like Ralph, obviously, although if he was American, and there's some big stuff here. So tax rises so they're going to be a 25% minimum tax of billionaires, a corporation tax rate of 28%. A doubling of foreign, on taxes on foreign earnings of US corporations. And what I also think is particularly surprising, which I have to say I've not really heard much about, so clearly I need to get out more, but is a quadrupling of tax on corporate share buybacks, and that would go from 1% to 4%. Now, like I say, when I saw that, I thought didn't know that tax was there, but certainly to quadruple it, especially when we've heard of companies most recently, notably banks and utilities companies and oil companies, having these massive share buybacks. It certainly is of the moment. But anyway, what do you think of that, Ralph?
Well, as always, it's a big topic to respond to. Now, what I think, first of all, is I think the US deficit is now approaching something like $3 trillion. Mm-hmm. And obviously, we are getting to levels of magnitude here where you have to actually see that the money is going to come in from somewhere. This is, by the way, analogous to the UK. We are in a very similar situation. And of course, we all know where these deficits come from. Mm-hmm. They come from various support programs which were made necessary by the pandemic. They are made necessary by further support programs which are made necessary by very high electricity costs feeding into general cost of living costs, etc. So we know why budget deficits are high. We as citizens all need that support, but unfortunately we also have to pay for it somehow. And that has to be done through higher taxes, so that in itself is not really a surprise, I believe, to anybody. What is interesting is that some of the sources of incremental tax revenue are sort of perhaps feeding into a traditional Republican prejudice of what a Democrat-led government, a democratic, government would actually do, and that is first of all to tax the rich, and second of all to tax business, and that's sort of what he's doing, but I think also we need to remember and put this into a context which we might have forgotten, and that is that President Trump has obviously reduced corporation tax in a very material way to what I think was something like 30% to 20%, so reduced it by 10 percentage points. So relative to a low level, we're coming up to levels which are not as high as they used to be pre-Trump administration. Mm-hmm. So that puts that in context perhaps a little bit. The second thing which I'd like to say is, yes, the increase from 1 to 4 percentage point or percent tax on share buybacks is interesting as a signal, because I don't really know what I think of that so much, because it sort of penalizes companies, arguably, who have been cash generative to such an extent that they are able to conduct a share buyback. It also, by perhaps making that less tax efficient than it used to be, incentivizes people being the corporate sector now, to opt for a reinvestment of the funds into their ongoing business rather than a return of cash to shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can argue about this until the proverbial cows come home, because it's a philosophical choice, I believe. But at the margin, I'm guessing that if you want to put this into a context of windfall taxes, then you have perhaps a similar dynamic here. I mean, the windfall tax is levied on companies which, through extraneous circumstances, are realizing supernormal profits. At the moment, these are the energy companies, of course, and it is held to be socially acceptable to actually put a one-time tax on companies of this nature. Mm-hmm. A quadrupling of a arguably low tax rate on share buybacks is a similar sort of thing, but it has a much broader and wider application. So I'm not so sure what I think of that. I'd rather not to have seen that happening, because to me it still disincentivizes companies from choosing a form of return allocation to investors, which is a share buyback. But I think my preference here is at the margin. It doesn't really matter that much. But I just thought it was interesting to see the Biden administration make these choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And mind you, though, I do kind of think that the windfall. I just going on the windfall, not the windfall tax, the
share buyback,
the share buyback tax. In a way, you could say that's you're going to be double taxing, aren't you? Really?
Yes.
But the interesting thing there is it's not just you would be targeting all sectors, not just those the supernormal profit ones. So that you would have thought that could potentially disincentivize share buybacks. Although, I mean, what do you think? I mean, I've always thought, with share buybacks, quite a lot of the time, it just shows that the company doesn't know what to do, and so it's like, well, I don't know, we can't invest in this, or I don't want to invest in that. So what are we going to do now? I don't know, let's do a buyback. Or, or either that, or our share price is an absolute nightmare at the moment. We're being shorted loads. So why don't we just get rid of the shorts and buy back our own shares? They're going to have to run away and they'll leave us alone. Who
knows? I mean, to be honest with you, in the end, I don't think necessarily there was that much thought behind it, and maybe we shouldn't think too much about it, but but it does disincentivize share buybacks over dividend income. I mean, basically, companies have two choices. Obviously, at the end of the profit and loss account, so to speak, is the net earnings. First, you have profits, then you pay the tax, then you have the net earnings. Out of this net earnings, you pay dividends, and it is your choice how much in dividends do you wish to pay. If you have a company which has growth opportunities to take advantage of, then you might argue that you pay less of a dividend in order to retain more investment in the company, which you will be able to turn into future earnings through the exploitation of the growth opportunities which are at your disposal. If you pay a higher dividend, then you might argue, well, our industry is currently X growth, or there is not that much growth opportunity in our industry. Whatever we will do as a company or management team, that's something which we cannot change. However, because we are an efficient management team which has the right ideas, we are still generating a lot of cash. We may not have so much growth, but we are efficient in what we do, and so therefore we generate cash. It is therefore right for us to pay some of that cash out to our owners, who are the investors, and therefore we are paying a higher dividend. Now, from year to year, there might be a situation where we have particularly high earnings to distribute, and then we might actually choose to do a share buyback on top or pay a special dividend. And this is the choice which a change in tax of this nature, as the Biden administration has just announced, would disincentivize against. So all things equal, you would now, a company which might actually think about, what are we going to do? Are we going to pay a special divvy, or are we going to do a share buyback? They might actually opt to do a special dividend. But even this lengthy explanation still doesn't tackle all the details, because a share buyback is only value additive if your share price is at a certain level. So let's not discuss that. And also, of course, the complexities go further, because I have just said that all of this is done out of after-tax profit, after profits after you have paid the tax. Now the tax is also being increased here. So there's a blanket disincentive put on the corporate sector. That is true. But I'm just going to go back to my initial point. That is from a low base, which is 10 percentage points lower than it used to be in the pre-Trump administration, on a backdrop of significantly enlarged public debt. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with this. I just think these are the signs of the times. We see them in the UK in the same way. I do find it interesting, and this is probably beyond the scope of what we are going to be able to discuss today, but just putting it out there, I've never really seen a progressive corporate tax system. We all know what the progressive personal tax, income tax system looks like. And I think most people would agree with the fact that it is equitable and just fair to tax people a higher, not just amount, but tax rate, who make more money.
So, in terms, just for, listeners who don't know, so progressive tax is one that basically increases depending on, the amount of money we're talking about. So a progressive income tax, you pay certain percentage of your earnings if you hit a certain threshold, and then another one on another threshold, etc., etc. So the idea is, the corporation tax, I believe, is just a flat rate. And so what we're suggesting, and this is, Biden, if you're listening, is the whole idea of potentially having a similar scale of corporation tax, because for instance, my company, which is Sahar Consulting, it's a very, very, very small company. Here it is, and and the thing is that it does seem a bit strange for me to suddenly have to pay tax as the same rate as something that's much bigger. But anyway, sorry, carry on.
Yes, you are a small company. This is true.
Thank you. Well, a slightly chubby company, but
you pay a crap salary to the contributor.
That's right.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a different topic. I'm just looking into the camera, sort of, whoa.
That's right.
You have to keep my money together, because Peter's not paying me anything.
That's right. Well, that's why you're having to wear hats and all sorts. You're not able to heat your
my house.
So.
Absolutely not. I'm still waiting for my mug as well. I don't even get a bloody Mac with a face on it. Anyway, moving on. Yes, indeed, progressive tax systems are just simply that. In the UK, for example, I can't remember exactly, I think it's £12,000 or thereabouts, which is tax-free. So more specifically, the tax on which you pay on this amount of money is 0%. And then you pay, I think, 20% on the next bracket, which is up to 25,000 or whatever it might be. And then you go up, and on £100,000, you then pay more tax. etc. That's called progressive tax. And normally a corporation tax system is a flat tax. And it would be at least interesting to explore perhaps the idea to introduce some form of progressivity into the corporate tax system as well. Because when I see things like windfall taxes, they always cause a debate in public and in political cycles, a debate which is very often driven by agendas and ideological worldviews of whether it is right to levy a tax on a company which has been particularly successful in particular years because of certain factors. Now, you would not really have this discussion on a repeated basis if you just basically had a progressive tax system which levies a higher tax rate on higher levels or layers of profit. And also you would then not have to arguably levy a windfall tax on companies. But we're just putting this out there as perhaps a topic for discussion and thought. I'm not blind to the fact that these kind of things, when implemented, cause all manner of intricacies and complexities and also generate unwanted behavior, is a sort of unintended consequences. We are aware of all this, just floating it as a balloon.
Yeah. So there you go, Joe. Right, you heard it here. You heard it right here,
Mr. Biden.
The Guildford and the London studios combining to help out our American cousins. So there you go. Anyway, so let's move on to the second topic, which is basically how to monetize AI. So, really interesting, article this week about DLA Piper, so big law firm DLA Piper, buying, poaching 10 data scientists from a smaller rival with the view to doing AI stuff. And I thought that this was very intriguing because I think that this is a very good idea, a very exciting idea that could really be monetized and could bring them in a lot of money potentially. Now, what was interesting is that every week I do a subscribers call on a Thursday night, 6:00, and generally speaking, I go through the news of the week, how the stories have developed over that week. But then I introduce 2 debating topics, and those are in the Thursday edition. I put them in the Thursday edition, and I was sort of doing this last night, and one of the debating topics, I'll just sort of read it out. One of the debating topics was, how will lawyers be able to make a fortune with AI? Now, there was one of the subscribers, and I'll say his first name because I don't know if he wants me to tell, but I thought I'm going to mention this because this was his idea, right? This is his idea, and we're just running with it here. His name is Lorenzo. Very, very good. Lorenzo, if you're listening, hello. That was a really great idea.
Lorenzo.
So Lorenzo, yeah, no, cool guy. And anyway, so the idea was that so Lorenzo's idea was that you get these people in house, they build something, for the in-house lawyers, like they have done, like Allen and Overy, for instance. They recently released they unveiled a bot, a chat GPT type, robot thing. So I'm using all the technical phrases here.
Clearly are.
But yeah, called Harvey, which is obviously, as everyone knows who's a lawyer and watches Suits, that is the name of the main character. So anyway, so they called it Harvey. So anyway, the idea would be DLA Piper, they've got these data scientists, they build something themselves, but then what they do is they build something that then can be used and ideally adapted to their client. And then what happens then is that the client will use that, and they might have some a few lawyers particularly assigned to them, and a data scientist or two assigned to them, and then that way you could either have that remotely, or you could have, say, a lawyer going in-house to the client or something like that. This could be potentially a really big money spinner, in my opinion, because what it does is it puts, being blunt about it, this is what I know as my sales background, but you are going to be in the client's face, because they're going to be using your stuff, and they're going to be asking you things as well. If you plant a lawyer in there as well from your company, it just means that you are more likely to get more work from that client, because you've got someone in there. Mm-hmm. They will know what's going on. The client will think, well, this person knows us, so they're well placed, therefore we'll give them the work, etc. But you could also get recurring revenue, which I think is a great stream of revenue, and I would have thought it's pretty sticky as well, because if if you're happy with the system, are you going to get rid of it? I don't think so. So anyway, I think it could be really big, not just for lawyers, but for all sorts of industries. But what do you think, Ralph?
Entirely. I mean, when you introduced me to this idea, to Lorenzo's idea, I immediately thought that was absolutely brilliant. I mean, I had my own thoughts on this, and I don't know where Lorenzo's thoughts end and mine start. So Lorenzo, from me as well, you've got it going on, mate. That's wicked. And no, I thought it was very interesting also in context of something else. In the context of the current investors' reaction to AI. Investors are clearly interested in this, enthralled by the opportunities. But at the same time, investors are sort of thinking, well, have we not seen this before? We've seen a dot-com boom and that crashed, and we've seen the euphoria of companies. Everybody had to have a web strategy and an internet vision, etc. And it was very unclear at the time where all this would have gone and how exactly it was an investable idea. And I think we're seeing this now again, that investors are saying, well, AI is all good stuff, and we can see that this is some transformational stuff which is going on here. But how exactly we are going to invest in what is unclear, and also some of the valuations which have recently grabbed the headlines appear to look a little bit inflated, given what the actual earnings generative power of some of these AIs actually is. If you take this investor skepticism which is currently building, then I think this particular idea is an answer to that, because what we are discussing here is a real world tangible commodity which arguably extends a measurable financial benefit to both the provider and the client. And what I mean by this is this: if I sort of embellish this a little bit and talk about a law firm currently employing lots of data scientists engaged in developing its own sort of ChatGPT type AI, then what we're talking about is a law firm which is in the process of training its AI on lots and lots of legal texts which are open source and available to everybody. But in addition to that, and crucially, training it on its own experience, its own case studies, its wins and why they won and provided a good job to the client in the past, and its losses and why it at times may not have been able to provide a good job to the client. All of this is going to be the body of material on which the AI is being trained. And if this is done right, then what you have is in the end a product which is, let's call it the legal assistant or something. I mean, clearly, I'm not a marketing person because that's the most boring name for a product you can possibly come up
well,
with.
you say that, but then someone came up with a brilliant name of ChatGPT, didn't they?
Yeah, that's true. So
of all the things they could have called it, they called it that.
That's true. So Microsoft, here I am. Excellent.
Yeah.
So cool. So the legal assistant, and the legal assistant is this AI, which is now being.
I know. You could call her Rachel, like after Meghan Markle's character in Suits. So you could call her Rachel. Anyway, sorry.
That would be good.
Yeah.
I think the actress is now in South Park. Maybe that's
that's right. Yeah.
not such a good
apparently
idea.
So. I have seen that. Yeah.
So anyway, so we have this we have this AI now, this legal AI, and let's say a client of this law firm was a tobacco company. So tobacco company is engaged in the production, the development of a new product. Vaping. I know that's not new anymore, but at some point it was. And so the project team tasked with the development of this product will have certain challenges to overcome. One of these challenges is invariably going to be of a legal nature. What are the legal potential pitfalls involved if we put a vaping product into the market? Now, in the olden days, that would have involved either going to the in-house lawyers or hiring potentially expensive external legal advice. With the legal assistant, the person tasked with investigating this, who is on the project team of the tobacco company, would just basically type into the legal assistant an elaborate version of the question, what can go wrong in legal terms? And it can, of course, be a properly phrased, fine-tuned, well-honed question. It would come back with a well-researched text, bullet pointing all the various legal hurdles, the potential issues, etc. That would feed into the project development, and at some stage you have a product which then, at that stage, they would go back to the lawyer, to the legal firm, and then hire, let's say, partner level legal advice. So the outcome of this is, first, from the point of view of the legal firm would have, as you said, a annuitized income, an annuity, a fee income which comes in every year. This is important to a legal firm because by definition its income is a little bit lumpy, especially if it is a smaller law firm. So that will smooth out revenues and commensurately smooth out earnings, and investors in legal companies like that. Second, it is scalable. They can do this in other sectors of their legal firm. Third, it ties the client in, as you said, because they are likely to actually come with other legal problems to this particular legal firm. Also, they might actually use word of mouth, and other clients can be sourced. B, big other sector from the point of view of the client. It reduces expenses. It keeps project development costs low at a time when the project is still in development, and when from the point of view of the product developing company, it is as yet unclear whether this is going to be a product that it can profitably bring to market. So during that time, it keeps expenses down, and only it incurs the higher legal expenses when the product is at an implementation stage. And I think that is now finally the first time that we have, maybe it's not the first time, but it is a possible real world commodity, application of an AI that I think everybody can understand and get on board with, especially also investors. So I'm excited by this, and this is where this is one example of the sort of things which we were discussing in the past, in our past shows, where I was saying that we still need to actually see the emergence of commoditizable products, applications of AI, and I think this is the sort of thing which we're going to see more often.
Yeah. I have to say, when you're talking about it's fascinating, this subject, and I was just thinking there might be two things here, weaknesses potentially. One is maybe you'd have to dumb down the AI at some stage, restrict it, because if the client said, what are the legal issues I would have with vaping, making vaping products, you hit the key, comes out with 5 points, and then it says, okay, fair enough, goes to the lawyer and then says, okay, the AI says this, what do you say? And if they say, well, that's exactly what I would have said, if you get that enough times, the client's going to think, well, what's the point in having the lawyer then? You're going to have to try to somehow build in a human, element that's going to add to it.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah,
no,
of course, yeah.
No, that is exactly the point.
Okay.
The point is not having the lawyer. If the point was not that, there would be no point to the entire idea. The point is that at the early stages of product development, you replace potentially expensive outside counsel with access to a machine.
No, fair enough. Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, of course, now we're drifting into a wider social debate, which we always have when automation of any scale comes in. It sort of would make the existence of lawyers at that level less justifiable from the point of view of the law company. But then, that may not be so nice if you're perhaps a paralegal who is going to be rationalized away. But from the point of view of the law company, again, that would again speak to the development of such a product rather than against it, because you can also lower your staff costs. So that's the first point.
No, fair enough. And the other thing I was going to say was, I wonder whether this would give a much bigger advantage to the bigger law firms, because they will have more cases, more people that, more ability to put more, information into the system, rather than some, smaller local place, because they just won't have the volume. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that's a fair point? Or?
Yes, I think that might well be the case. And if it is the case, and if we are going to see AI applications of this nature becoming de rigueur, so to speak, then it might actually lead to further consolidation in the legal sector for precisely this reason. Now, if it does, if it were to advantage bigger law firms, it would be for the reason that you also you train the AI on proprietary legal information that is not open source. And as I said in my little sort of chat earlier, I think that would, however, be the competitive advantage of this law firm's AI relative to that other law firm's AI, because otherwise it would just be a general AI which sits on open source data which everybody can access, which is fine, and that is of course also accessible by the small law firms. But yes, I believe that is a possibility.
I just had an idea, right? Is you could almost have, like you have Rightmove for buying properties.
Yeah.
Couldn't you do something like that with law? Because then what you do is you'd have like a central one, and everyone puts in their information. So it could be that the Magic Circle firms decide they want to keep their own, but then you could have another platform where it could say, well, this would be for all the mid-size firms, let's say mid-size and small firms, to put their information in, and then they can then use that as to level up the playing field versus the big players, perhaps. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, who knows where the development is going to go? Let's just hope that that idea is not going to turn out to be purple bricks rather than.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, other than that, though, I mean, we're talking about law, but it could be applicable, as we were saying earlier, to lots of other industries. So
Absolutely.
insurance industry, investment banking, tax accounting, accounting generally, anything really with a technical framework.
Yes.
But yes, any more thoughts on that?
No, entirely. And this is why I'm so excited about this, because it could actually be applied to any kind of industry where, let's say, intellectual property is key.
Yeah.
By which I mean an expertise and a knowledge of and expertise to juggle with regulation. That sentence, if you examine it, didn't make sense grammatically, but I was trying to make this too complicated. But I think you know what I mean. And for example, tax accountancy is fantastic. It's a superb example of this. I mean, for a company of your nature, for example, where you might actually find it would add value to you to employ a tax accountant, but these people might just charge a little bit too much to extend the benefit to you. If you had access to an AI which was trained on a knowledge of all the tax regulations which are applicable in your sector, and you just basically type in all the information, or you don't even have to do it if the information was held in a inalterable way on blockchain, then basically could just be automated. The entire thing could be automated, and it would be like a self-populating, self-assessment tax application, which we do sort of every year. And you could just basically do that. Maybe you give it a once over by a tax accountant towards the end who charges you a nominal fee for it. And then it is sometimes said, I've sort of chatted with other people about similar sort of things in the past. And some pushback which I had was, well, but the tax accountants or whoever the incumbent of that service is would surely push back against it. But then maybe they wouldn't, because you have a certain elasticity here. Yes, there would be less expertise involved from the point of view of the tax accountant, but then also there would be less time involved. So you would charge less, but the service would maybe take you 5 minutes to just give it a once over and put a legalizing signature. And that's it. I mean, you don't even have to do it. That's where all the paralegals might actually go. So anyway, I'm clearly talking in more general terms, but I think this type of application would find a home in any industry which is dominated by this type of dynamic. You mentioned the insurance industry, making policy literature accessible to people. That actually will sound amusing, because none of us understands policy literature. And the funny thing about it is the insurance industry know that nobody does so. They have been, for the last 10 years that I know, project groups in pretty much every insurance company which I used to follow as an analyst, tasked with making policy literature more understandable to customers. Well, that's sort of exactly where an AI might actually find an application. Anyway, so yes, I think the future is going to see wide-ranging and incisive changes in corporate practices, and this is going to be one source of it.
Brilliant. Okay, so anyway, let's move on to the final one. We've got to try and keep this brief, I guess, but is to say that there's been a lot of stuff going on with regard to TikTok. The TikTok is owned by ByteDance, and TikTok is currently being looked at by US regulators. They're doing a tour of sort of European countries at the moment to try to convince them that they are not a potential security risk. So obviously we know that the US, if you're US government employees, EU I don't know, it was EU, well, anyway, so in Europe anyway, basically government employees, then they're all banned from TikTok. Sunak is under pressure to do the same thing for British government employees as well. So the next step is potentially, if TikTok is not successful in convincing, the regulators and things that the user data is not safe, then I really do think that TikTok could get banned. And I think that at the moment it doesn't feel like that because everyone uses it and it's just everywhere, and the growth has been exponential over the last few years. But I just think that all this chat about having data centers in Europe or data centers in America to make sure that this stuff is kept locally and it isn't accessible by the Chinese government, if it is indeed accessible. This is a very big thing, and if it was banned, it would be pretty disastrous for TikTok and its owner ByteDance, because they're thinking of listing, and this could absolutely decimate their valuation. Mm-hmm. So yes, I mean, what do you think of that, Ralph?
Well, it's a fascinating development. I mean, to cast maybe a wider net and a wider framework, it almost looks to me as if the Biden administration may feel that it is outgoing and that it's not going to be in the Oval Office in the next administration period. And we see a lot of bold moves from this administration at the moment. The Anti-Inflation Act, we have just discussed the wide-ranging potential changes to the tax system, and now we see a threat to ban TikTok outright. Now, if that was to happen, I would be greatly I don't know. I would be greatly amused by it in a sense, not because I think corporations should be banned. That would not be a good thing, but because the U.S. administration would clearly send a signal, a message to people saying that if there are security concerns, then we will not shy away from banning the technology. Now, I make the statement, but I'm as I'm saying it, I'm aware that that for this to have teeth, it would need to be uniformly applied.
Yeah.
So it's not really cool to ban TikTok if you do not then also ban or put restrictions on Facebook, because it also was engaged at one time at least in activities which caused security concerns. And if that therefore was to be carried out, a ban against TikTok, without embedding it in a uniform approach to other tech companies, it would start smacking or smelling less of a new and boldly implemented regulatory generic policy, and perhaps start to be seen as another salvo in the deteriorating or sharpening US-Chinese, let's call it trade war in want of a better word. So there are many aspects to this, but reducing it to the most obvious one, which is attacking and tackling security issues generated by technology companies, yes, I would say it sends a good message, but there is that if it was to be uniformly applied to other tech companies as well.
No, I agree. I think that's the thing. If it did get banned, it would cause massive shockwaves among all of social media. I think that they would really smarten up their act, because they would be thinking, well, if this can happen to TikTok, it can happen to us. But
exactly.
there is one place which I think would be very safe for all this user information to be stored, and I think that place is Joe Biden's garage, because I mean, we know that he keeps his secret documents in his garage. And as he said, it's not as if he leaves his garage open. I mean, he does lock the garage.
It's locked, isn't it? It's no issue.
Yeah.
It's in the boot of his Corvette as well, isn't it? So it's doubly locked. It's not like Mar-a-Lago where anybody can just walk in.
No. So there we go. I mean, I think that, he could. I think that Joe Biden just needs to, he could just chip in and say, look, it's fine, guys. If this is what you're worried about, my garage, I'll make it available. So So anyway, on that note,
lots of advice to Biden, wasn't there?
Absolutely. So I think we'll end today's a Biden edition. Thank you very much.
We abandoned. Oh my God, I shouldn't try to be funny.
Please, no, please do.
I'm not going to say anything anymore.
Okay, good. Well, you're just biding your time, aren't you, really? Yeah. Anyway, yes. Anyway, right. So, thank you very much, as always. Brilliant. Always good fun, and just really, really interesting. Some good stuff this week, I think. So anyway, thank you very much, Ralph, and have a lovely weekend.
Thanks a lot, Peter, and thanks everybody.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.